Oh, you've got a pretty good history type of thing going on. Pretty successful on the website. I've noticed.
It's got that pretty good history thing going.
Well, his one is the top episode, isn't it?
Is it?
Yeah, you come out on top.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, we did a survey, and I'm not supposed to mention that, but no, you're
it is
and
pretty
viewers
good.
and everything. Well, yes. So, why is Epochs so? In fact, no. Before I ask you why Epochs is so bloody good, we probably would have done the transition thing by now. So welcome. Fresh set of lovely you people. We got a promotion on at the moment, which is Sargon. So basically, if you're wondering what's going on here, is the boss has gone on holiday. So standards have lacked slightly, and I was able to get onto his laptop and put a new code in. So you now get 50% off any tier for the next 3 months. So it was cheap. It is now ridiculously cheap. So enter code Sargon on the web, Sargon with an E if you're listening, and you can watch some history stuff.
Is he actually wearing that?
I was going to say, is this a real picture?
It doesn't look like it's shot. It looks like
he was actually giving a speech by the beach for some reason. But
the sombrero was to add to his authority.
The new version of Photoshop, you basically just take a picture of him with a microphone in his hand, and you say, right, put a hat on and give him a cocktail, and it did that. Yeah. That's AI, that is.
Oh, really?
Oh, so he wasn't wearing the sombrero.
It didn't even mess up the fingers on the cocktail either.
Yeah, that's and normally... AI can do fingers now.
That's terrifying.
Yes.
So yeah, Epochs rather.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I did. I am just a complete and utter history nerd, fan, geek, and all I've ever really wanted to do is somehow try and make a living, try and pay my bills by just talking and chatting about history.
Because you didn't actually start off doing that, did you? You had a proper job in finance.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. For nearly 20 years. Yeah, I worked in sort of asset management and commodities and all sorts of things. Because it's very, very difficult to make a living talking about history. I mean, there's a few jobs you can do. Like you can be a curator in a museum or something.
You could just be a history teacher.
Who wants to wrangle an entire class of children?
Yeah, I don't really want to coerce kids into listening to me. But I am one of those people who, at a pub or a barbecue or a dinner party or something, will just start
talking about the Roman Empire.
And a lot of people don't like that.
Right.
A lot of people just wait for you to stop.
So you just keep going?
Or just, no.
Until they submit?
No, I'm not a sociopath.
Oh, right.
But so I did start my own channel, History Bro. Check that out on YouTube. Subscribe to History Bro. And I spoke to Carl a couple of times about Hannibal, Alexander the Great, Xenophon.
Oh, Carl likes a bit of history.
And so when Carl started Epochs, he wanted, a resident history nerd. And I volunteered.
Did he start it without you then, or were you?
Yeah. I didn't join for 3 months, 4 months, maybe?
Well,
3 or 4 months.
Epochs was your thing, wasn't it? I thought the very first episode was you and Carl.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Oh, right.
But Dan was asking. I wasn't here. I wasn't at Lotus Eaters from day one.
I meant to be in the beginning of Epochs.
So long.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's always been mine.
To the
from day one.
law.
It's all right. I was there 3,000 years ago.
I don't believe you.
And
quoting Elrond.
And so I sort of got my wish to just talk about history because I could sort of endlessly do it. Where my background is ancient history, classical history.
Yeah.
But Epochs, I can do whatever I want within reason. Cole, sometimes the subjects Cole just decides or wants to do, but usually the vast majority of the time it's just up to me. And so whatever tickles my fancy. So even though my background is ancient history, I go all over the place.
Because this is the thing, like when you learn it at school, they make it so stuffy and boring, it's hard not to be bored by it. But literally, it's the most exciting things that have happened ever in history, is generally what history is. So, I mean, it's when you get into it, as long as you can get to what's actually happened, it is fascinating stuff, all of it. The only problem is I was reading an article the other day saying that it was fundamentally sexist.
Good.
Because it is literally the thing is his story.
Oh, well, I don't care about that.
Right.
I'm just interested in...
That's not even the actual etymology of the word, is it?
I'm just interested in, things that are interesting. And I'm one of those people that something has to be extremely dry and boring before I sort of switch off.
Right.
So I do try and pick, obviously, interesting things.
Yes.
But yeah, so jump around all over the place.
Right.
Done a few on sort of World War II and 20th century things. Done a few with all of you guys, quite a few with Josh. One of my favourite series was about World War II. Operation Market Garden when the Brits and
I
Americans
really enjoyed that because I knew nothing
liberated
about
Holland.
it, and
Was
I
that
got
the
to sit in.
Yeah. Bridge Too Far.
Oh, that's a really good film.
Yeah.
That's an old one, but it's a really good film.
Yeah. And the original novel is great, and I keep rereading it for some reason. The one I did with Harry, I only done one with Harry, but that was on the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, I found that really interesting.
I rewatched that. I don't actually rewatch them very often, but occasionally I will. And I rewatched that one a month or two ago, and I thought it was a really good one, actually.
Yeah, I
really
enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
You find that when you watch one that you did like a year or so ago, there's been enough time passed, and you've done enough of them that you kind of forget, and you kind of watch it as a viewer. As I did that with a few episodes of Contemplations, it was just like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I was like, wait a minute, that's me.
And just to make it clear to the audience, the reason we don't tend to rewatch our stuff a lot is not because it's boring. All of these are absolutely fascinating. It's because you tend to watch them like 3 times the editing process.
Yeah.
So you've got them completely by the time they come out.
And plus, sort of, you lived it. So you know what's coming up. You know what's going to be said. And you have to rewatch it, or I do, a few times in the post-production phase.
Yeah.
So you've actually lived it and then watched it at least probably a couple of times over.
Yeah.
So going back and watching it again is unnecessary and usually a bit weird. However, I still have done once or twice.
It is still useful to occasionally go back and look over work that you've done, if only because you'll have done so much research in the preparation for it that some of it just won't have stuck in your head as much as the rest of it. So sometimes it can be good to go back over your own work just to remind yourself of a few things.
And we've done a few, haven't we, Dan, on more economic things. We did the Tulip Mania.
Tulip Bubble.
We did Wall Street Crash.
Yes.
And we did Black Tuesday.
Oh, yes.
When Soros stole the pound.
Yes. To be fair, John Major made it very, very easy for him. But I mean, that one, for example, that one's really important because it basically sets up the world. I mean, it's why George Soros is so rich and is able to, do all the malign stuff he's to do. It's why we came out of the euro. I mean, it's why we have so many currency difficulties in Europe at the moment. I mean, it's a setup to a huge amount of stuff, like why the Tories came out and we got Blair, and then we got, the mass immigration that followed and the move to the left, and why Tories have become a left-wing party. I mean, it just sets up. It's such a pivotal event.
Well, it's very kind of you to call it important, but some of these stories are because to be ignorant of one's past is to forever remain a child. The present is a product of the past, and you can't hope to understand the present without an appreciation of the past.
Yes,
I'm paraphrasing Cicero there.
And most of the stuff that you cover is, it could have gone either way. And if it did, we would be living in a very different world if just a few of these had gone a different way.
Occasionally, I've heard people say things like, "Oh, I don't care about World War I or World War II. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't affect us."
That's
anymore.
one of the most ignorant statements anyone could ever say.
Right? Yeah. That is a pretty backward thing to think. But even if you go back to the ancient world or the medieval world or something, it really does matter in all sorts of ways. But, the thing is with some of these stories is they're just sort of throwaway, flippant things that, you could do without. And some of them are some of the greatest stories, because history or truth is sometimes much more fantastic than any fiction. And I feel, without going too over the top, I feel sort of genuinely privileged in the old sense of that word, lucky to be able to bring these stories to some people. But sometimes I get comments where people say, "Oh, I've never heard of that thing. I had no idea about that at all."
Yeah, there is actually one story which is genuinely the most fantastic. It would make the best movie ever, the story of this one man's life, because of the stuff that he did and the stuff that he got away with. And I'd love for you to cover it, but I can't, because it just so happened that he spawned a religion. And if you talk about this particular chap, we'd probably get firebombed or heads cut off or something like that. But that guy,
is it L. Ron Hubbard?
But no, I think I know who it is that you're talking about.
I'm
being
guy,
silly.
I mean, he was basically this Arab king guy.
He's a warlord.
Yes, and he that
Big
was
fan of kids.
I'd love to cover that one, but we can't do that.
Well, I think we can. Tom Holland wrote a brilliant book called "Is it In the Shadow of the Sword?" I think it's called, about the life of Muhammad.
Yes, I wasn't going to say it.
Blessings be upon his name. So you can talk about it. It's a historical figure, probably. Right. And so we would be allowed to talk about it.
Right. Okay.
Because
that was a really interesting
might be a
point.
bit difficult.
There is so many things, though, and that's one of the things I'd like to say to
Just
some of the people out there.
Question mark, like a Pokemon card. Who is it?
Some of the people, I get lots of recommendations or requests.
Right.
And unfortunately, can't get through them all.
Yes.
So do still keep asking and things if there's a particular thing you want. But we only do one a week, so
Yes.
Can never really get.
So what's some of your favourites then?
Well, I would say more than half, 2/3 or 3/4 of them are sort of equal in my mind. I just loved it because I nearly always pick something that I am genuinely interested in.
Yeah.
One of the ones that you've asked me this before, and one of the ones that sticks out in my mind, which is actually a bit of an anomaly, so it's not sort of your classic history lesson type history, was I did the history of Formula One with Thomas Dowling. Shout out to Thomas Dowling. Because he loves racing and karting.
I thought you were going to say racism for a second then.
He's a professional racist. Yeah.
I mean, he might as well. I don't know.
And it's the only one out of 124, 125 odd episodes we've done now, which isn't sort of your classic textbook history type.
Yeah, that's
history.
not what you normally do.
No, right. But I particularly enjoyed that because, like I was saying to Josh earlier, if it's a topic that you honestly, genuinely are interested in and love, it's not work anymore.
Right. Okay. So, my thoughts on Formula One, because I used to watch this when I was little, but it used to be a very different sport a long time ago because you used to watch it a bit like, and this is going to make me sound bad, but I'm going to have, but everyone's thinking it, so I'm going to have to go there. But you used to watch this 20 years ago because you knew there was a serious chance that somebody was going to be turned into a human fireball on a big race.
So the NASCAR,
but that just doesn't happen anymore.
Not that
which is often
sometimes.
Sometimes you'll see the cars on the first corner when they're all bunched up together will still like knock each other a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, if somebody gets a fender bender.
That was the angle of this episode as well. Is that it's all about the history of results and the cars and everything, but also how extraordinarily dangerous it used to be. Yeah, you quite often see, not often, but back in the early 70s was when it was at its most dangerous.
Yeah.
And something like 1 in 7 drivers died every season on season.
1 in 7 every season.
There's quite a few examples of guys crashing and their car going up in flames, and they burn alive, essentially, live on TV. And that doesn't happen anymore. Romain Grosjean a few years ago got in a fire, and it was one of the first fires I've seen in years and years and years. And he got out and he did burn his hands a little bit, but he walked away from it.
But I mean, they wear proper flame suits and they've got, firemen.
Oh, there's endless things now. I mean, the petrol tanks are like a bladder made out of a space-age material, which sort of is almost impossible to rip. Whereas back in the day, I mean, Jackie Stewart had a crash once where he came off the track and just crashed into the side of a barn. They don't have barns at the sides of the track anymore. Yeah. And he was crushed into the cockpit. And the cockpit filled up with petrol, his old school petrol tank, natural tank, and the electrics weren't turned off. So he's sitting in a bath, trapped in a bath of petrol. And, he obviously survived because he's still alive to this day. Right. But yeah, it's extraordinarily dangerous.
Must have been squeaky bum time, though.
Terrifying. That sometimes a marshal was once hit by a car and basically exploded on TV.
Which is like bits of arms and stuff.
Yeah. It's a South African Grand Prix, and the man in the car, Tom Price, was also killed. So, it used to be extraordinarily dangerous. Pretty disgusting, actually. But anyway, enough about Formula One, because that was a bit of an anomaly of a one. But we go through all the history of it.
What else have you done? You got the bridge one,
Bridge 5. This was the series with Josh. Is it a 5-part series? Was it? I think.
Yeah, it was 4 or 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the novel A Bridge Too Far is one of my favourite books. And of course, they made a film out of it. Dickie Attenborough made a film out of it, and it's the story of when the British and the Americans paratrooped, dropped. The airborne dropped into Nazi-occupied Holland, and it was a bit of a debacle.
But, I mean, this
I won't give it away.
Ballsy British spirit on display in spades.
And that's Monty, Bernard Law Montgomery, who was sort of responsible for it, and it was a bit of a balls up, actually. But also many heroic actions also took place. I had a few guests on. It's nearly always with Carl, but a fair few with you, Josh, and a few with a few other people. But I have had the pleasure and honour of having Apostolic Majesty on a few times, another history YouTuber called Apostolic Majesty. Okay. And whenever he's on, it's really brilliant because I just pick his brain rather than me sort of taking the reins and leading it. I just sort of ask him questions, let him sort of lead the conversation. And his depth of knowledge, his breadth and depth of knowledge is truly remarkable. There's had a mini-series with him about the origins of World War One.
There should be a link for that, John.
And had him on, talked to him about a couple of other topics as well. I would have him on all the time if I could. It's very good of him to give me as much of his time. But I've spoken to some other people. An early one with a critical drinker, talking about Waterloo. There's one with Mauler, Longman. One with Dankula, talking all about the history of his Mad Lads series.
Oh, okay.
So a whole sort of hour or two about that. I had Calvin on. Calvin Robinson talked about Christianity. I had Luca Johnson recently talking about Pitt the Younger. I had a chap on just the other day, Luke Parker, talking about Kohima and the Chindits and things. So it's not always Carl, but it's nearly always Carl. And I just hope I can do some of these stories justice because sometimes it's something that's so important to me. For example, the story of maybe Shackleton springs to mind. And we're going to do a Wellington series soon. I say series, probably just 2 parts. They're so important to me that I feel like I'm almost not worthy to be talking about it. I'll do it anyway. It's not going to put me off. But if I can bring some of these stories, like we did one on the 100 Years' War, I did one with a couple with John Wheatley about the Wars of the Roses and things. They're such important stories that if I can bring it to people who didn't know about it before,
yes,
I've actually made the world a little bit richer. And that's something of value, rather than sitting at a desk all day at a commodities trading firm or an asset management asset management house, making some fat cat a tiny bit richer. That's not really fulfilling to me. Whereas if I can inform people about important things in history,
that was
nice.
That was my thoughts on finance as well. Pays well, lots of spreadsheets, very boring.
Yeah.
And it's doing something like this is actually quite fun.
Yeah, making the shareholders a tiny bit richer. Yeah. Spending all my time and energy doing that, essentially, that's the net result of how I spend my days. Is that the shareholders at State Street or Northern Trust or JP Morgan are a tiny bit richer because I wasted my life 9 to 5 days a week.
Whereas now you're making people culturally richer.
Well, hopefully, sometimes at least.
Yes.
Sometimes at least.
What else have you got for us on the list to have a look at then? Is that
did one on Doc Holliday. So like I say, it's not all ancient history. There are loads on ancient history.
Yes.
On Lycurgus and Solon and Pompey and all sorts of things. But sometimes it's just someone that I particularly am interested in and love. And Doc Holliday was one of them. Just the story of Doc Holliday's life. Quite a remarkable person and life. The shootout at the OK Corral.
The gunslinger who died of tuberculosis.
Yeah, TB. Yeah, he died young. Yeah.
And was he really as good as the sort of culture has made him out to be as a gunslinger?
Yeah. I mean, he was fast. Apparently, he was genuinely one of the fastest around. Wasn't all that accurate, but you didn't have to be because it would usually take place at point blank range.
Yes, I suppose you just stand closer to the person.
But whoever's got the quickest draw.
But apparently, he was very, very fast. Right. But at the OK Corral, he had a 10-bore shotgun. So you sort of, it's difficult to miss if you're
the speed of his draw doesn't matter as much if he's got a shotgun.
Yeah. It's like a small cannon he had on him, 10-bore.
It is absurd when you see those videos of slow motion quick draws where they're also super accurate with all of the shots as well. That's always amazing.
Yeah. But I mean, just the 19th century sort of Wild West, because Doc Holliday's life is really at the end, really. I mean, historians argue about when did the Wild West end and things. Right. He's sort of undeniably at the end or towards the end of that period. Nonetheless, it's still sort of classic Wild West stuff. That's sometimes if me and Carl haven't got a real series or something in mind that we're absolutely dying to do, it would just be left up to me to pick something.
To be fair, California, given its crime rate, could do with chaps like this. Back again.
Vigilantes, essentially. Yeah, well, the Earp brothers and Doc, were fighting on the side of the law, right? Yeah, so they were sort of the good guys. Yeah, I mentioned Shackleton a minute ago.
Oh, yes, we've got Shackleton.
So this was one we did a little series where I did sort of Scott of the Antarctic and did about conquering Everest. Did one about Shackleton. Again, a bit like Doc Holliday or the Duke of Wellington or something. It's just one of among my favourite things, or Henry V or something, just sort of read and reread about.
So this is why you need a British aristocracy class, because most of them will just spend their time going and having lunch and stuff, but some of them will think, okay, I need to conquer Everest or the Antarctic or whatever it is.
Yeah. I've done one on Sir Charles Napier, did one on Clive of India.
Yes.
And Gordon of Khartoum. So there's a fair few sort of specific
men of this
British
age
heroes
just
in there.
Ripped by the spirit of I need to go and do something completely bloody remarkable, and they did.
Most of the great things that have happened in Britain that are accountable to individuals have normally been aristocrats who've been twiddling their fingers, looking to go out for adventure, really.
Because it must have been incredibly boring to be a sort of rich in that time period, because you didn't have anything to keep you busy, and you didn't have Lotus Eater subscriptions available at only £5 a month. With the code Sargon, you get 50% off for the next 3 months. But you would have just had dinner parties to go to, and croquet to play. So actually going off and doing a jungle or a mountain or something.
Yeah, you do need that combination of leisure time and money.
Yes.
But Shackleton was a very serious guy. He wasn't just this. He wasn't just like a multi-millionaire playboy and couldn't think of anything else to do. Right. It was sort of his whole life's ambition to try and reach the South Pole. And we were pipped. Well, Captain Scott was pipped first, but then Ernest Shackleton went back. And the extraordinary adventures. The thing to take away about Ernest Shackleton is that he didn't really get anywhere near the South Pole on his last famous expedition. It was all about an escape, an evasion, a survival ordeal.
You make a point. We used to have loads of these guys, and now we just got Elon Musk. Got like one guy who's going to go. I'm going to go to Mars.
Now we've got massive restrictions on how people can get about the place. If you are a young man, it's financially restrictive to try and get about the place, and also most young men are probably being distracted by the fact that they have. I'm sorry to stab this dagger in your heart. I know it's a soft subject for you, but they have on-access demand pornography. They have video games that they can get access to and just mess all the time with. They have no.
Why did you pick the adjective soft?
That's up for interpretation, Dan. I know it's a soft spot for you, is what I'm saying.
I'm not even going to try and unpick that.
There are still some people like Sir Ranulph Fiennes, for example, sort of a modern day adventurer.
Yeah, but everything's on Google Earth.
He's getting on now, though, isn't he?
Oh, he's an old chap now. Yeah.
What my point is that it's more and more financially restrictive, and it's less risk to reward.
Our very
for
own
young men these
Callum
days.
is very much
or Lord
fits the bill.
Someone. These guys do still exist.
They do still exist, but not in the same numbers. You could argue.
Do you think anyone would be making an Epochs of Callum in 100 years' time?
Maybe.
Macabo might.
Won't be making it about me.
I doubt it. There's also some. I do a lot of ancient history things as well, because, as I say, that is really my forte. So there's all sorts of things from the ancient world. One of my favourite ones was on the Year of the Four Emperors, which is just sort of Rome on steroids. It was after the death of Nero. Nero had murdered every single member of his own family, sort of extinguished the Julio-Claudian dynasty. And so Rome...
all of them?
Yeah. Including his own mum. Yeah, murdered his own mum. Yeah. And
right.
Sorry?
Is he a bit...
well, that's up for debate. A lot of people say no, he was just very, very, very sadistic. I think he may have been clinically insane, but most historians say he probably wasn't.
Right. I don't know. It's not normal, sane behaviour to wipe out your bloodline, though, is it?
No, not at all.
Did he at least have
it might be more normal these days.
But there's sort of a very, very high benchmark to say that you're clinically insane. Lots of people do, mass murders or kill their own family, and they go to trial, and psychologists say, no, you're fit to stand trial. You knew right from wrong, and you did it anyway.
To be fair, a lot of Americans at the moment are turning their kids into eunuchs, and they're considered sane.
I doubt, but
yes.
So the difference between being just evil and sadistic or clinically insane, you don't know what you're doing. You're not responsible for your actions. I think. Right. I don't know. Nero probably was, but anyway, after he was, the Senate declared him sort of an enemy of the people of Rome. The Roman diadem was up for grabs, and a bunch of different generals from all over the empire vied for control. And in 1 year, there was 4 emperors. Or you could say in 18 months, there was 6, including Nero. So anyway.
Was one of them Liz Truss?
But yeah, so that's sort of a period in Rome that is, for me, among one of my favourite episodes, because it is so sort of extreme.
Yes.
But we have got all sorts on there.
Even for Rome. So
one of my other favourite ones was, we talked about Tacitus's Germania, an ancient historian called Tacitus, living in the age of sort of Trajan times.
Is that where we
wrote
get
about
the
the Germans
from?
Sorry?
Is that where
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
And he wrote a book about the Germans,
right,
called the Germania, or the Germania,
right,
which survives to this day. It describes the ancient Germans. That was one of my favourite ones.
What did he say about the German? We have to be careful, because I referred to the survey results earlier, and one of the comments on why people unsubscribed was because of your German racism.
Really?
Which I thought we did enough, to be honest. But
we've got to step up our game.
Yes. So what did Tacticus say about the Germans then?
Well, a number of things. One of the main things is that they're a wellspring of people that are sort of undiluted by foreigners.
Oh, right. Well, that aged badly, didn't it?
That's one of the things he said. Also, they're very noble. They don't really need many laws, because they just naturally tell the truth and things.
So that is still true. Yeah.
And they're sort of very big and extremely barbaric in terms of sort of military prowess.
Yeah.
So it's actually a
How
mixture
glorious
of
we
things that are both good and bad.
Right.
But you have to watch the episode.
Yeah.
Become a subscriber and then
no
watch the episode.
spoilers.
So yeah, you can see on the side they also recently did one about the War of the Spanish Succession and the War of the Austrian Succession, and coming up this coming Sunday is the 7 Years' War. Those last two feature Frederick the Great. So again, very, very Germanic. So maybe there is a bit of a bent towards Germanness.
Right. Okay. Well, if you're doing history and history tends towards wars, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to leave them out, wouldn't you?
We also did one on the war on the Eastern Front, the Battle of Kursk. So there are a few sort of World War II things, a few World War I ones. Usually every November on Armistice Day, I do something in and around World War One. Yeah. As well.
Well, and they were fighting the Romans as well. I mean, they've clearly got a bit of a bolshy side to them. Right.
Well, coming up next, other things we want to do. We're going to do Wellington as soon as Carl comes back.
Oh.
Or could you scroll back up a bit there? Oh, there you go. I'm going to do a series on T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, the uncrowned king of Mecca.
Yes.
So going to do one all about that. Carl wants to do one about the civil wars of Marius and Sulla, which are the Roman civil wars just before the age of Caesar. And where Carl and I, right at the beginning of my History Bro career, we did some long ones on Hannibal and Alexander, and we're going to redo sort of, look at those for Epochs. But also very soon, again, when Carl comes back from the United States, we're going to do quite a long, it's going to have to be a whole series on the Iliad. Maybe hope to get Stelios in on it as well, being a Greek man.
Yes.
Would be really helpful.
Stelios? Greek?
No way.
What? You didn't know? What? And then it follows on from that to do the Odyssey and then maybe Virgil's Aeneid after. So there's a whole lot there. And one other thing to say, I'm going to do a series at some point on the Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But what I mean
a bit
is,
left of field.
Well, no, the actual
how
real
does that
life
flow directly in from the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Well, when I say the Turtles, what I really mean is the real histories of the life of Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Donatello.
Oh, okay.
Vasari,
what the cartoons were based on.
Right.
Yeah, but, an Italian man who lived at the time wrote, or just after, wrote biographies of them all. So I'd quite like to do a series of 4 there, because they are also fascinating,
characters like that.
interesting lives. Yeah, right. Yeah, sort of true geniuses. Certainly in the case of Leonardo and Michelangelo, anyway.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Epoch series, this episode on the Battle of Kohima. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.